But I'm going to go ahead and just hit record our story, man. I think that's my goal, right? Is to be able to unpack our story and figure out, I don't even know what year our story started, 2008?
2008.
It's a long time ago.
I came to Impact Elevate with Chrissy Sands.
What grade were you in? Sophomore, junior?
I was finishing my sophomore year. It was like the summer of my sophomore year.
Yeah.
Going into the fall of my junior year.
Okay. Oh my gosh, awesome. And I feel like the first like bestest encounter that we had was at fall retreat. That's always like the one that's ingrained. You ran an errand with a leader to go get prune juice for a girl who couldn't go to the
A
bathroom.
female leader.
Yeah, we'll talk about that one at some point. And it's skinny jeans, long hair, John Rush. But that's like the picture that's always ingrained in my head as far as like when we met.
Yeah, that is true, because when I first started coming, you were more focused on middle school.
Yeah.
And so I just didn't see you that much. Yeah, and fall retreat.
Dude, that retreat was amazing because it's like if you were to play out, or if they were to actually remake now modern day like Lord of the Flies book,
Yeah.
I feel like that would be that retreat.
Yeah.
It was just chaotic and people everywhere, and
Yeah.
like kids chasing other kids with like crutches that they're supposed to be walking on, wheelchairs on top of bunks, live chickens being thrown in.
The story I tell about that is like 95% of telling the story of me in youth group is, to this day, some of the most immaculate relational discipleship, like men in my life. But at the retreat itself was this like gap where I don't know if it's because we were busy or because I was new, but basically I went on that retreat to hook up with this girl, and no guy leader tried to like stop me. Like the first like day. It's like, that's my memory. So it was like just me walking around trying to like make a move, because I wasn't like a Christ follower then.
Yeah.
Like, and so that's even interesting to think. You bring up the prune juice thing of like when that girl was like constipated or sick or something. It's so interesting, the juxtaposition of the two me's that were there, because I can't even embody myself with the helpful me. I'm like, all I can remember is like the kid who wanted to like hook up with that girl. So it's very interesting to even see those two me's at play. I'm like, where was I just like, I'll help these leaders of a place I really don't know, It's so weird.
That's so funny. So I remember being in like the leaders meeting, and it was like we were going over service stuff. Megan was running over a few elements, and I remember her being on stage asking for like a certain part of the video to play, and literally 100% of the leaders were in the room. And I looked around and recognized that, and I was like, if all the leaders are in this room, what's happening out there? And that's when I walked out the door and just looked, and you could see all the way down the dirt road, like that line, the cabins.
Yeah.
And it was kids running this way, chasing other kids with the giant rat tail towels, like trying to whip them. Kids about 20 yards behind them running the opposite direction, like literally with a crutch. Yeah. And then it was just like chaos everywhere.
I was walking around the lake with that girl.
Yeah. And I ran back in and I was like, everybody out now.
Well, and also at that camp, which is in Central Florida, they had like a small zoo, and like our guys, the football guys that I didn't know at the time, were let them out and chasing the emu. And then the craziest thing is this kid Ty, I don't know how much we'll say names or not in this, but like this is a good, like, he was full sprinting after that. And I remember talking to someone, it's like, yeah, it's crazy because that kid's foot is broken. And I'm like, what kind of freak? Like, who are these?
That kid was an animal.
Oh, yeah. And
he's also the same kid that caught the live chicken and threw it in the middle school bunk.
Legend. Yeah. Well, and so I started coming because I lived in Kissimmee, Florida, and Celebration, Florida had a lot more fun things to do. And my experience that had brought me to that was that me and my friends started hanging out with girls from Celebration who had a lot more money than the girls from Kissimmee. And the ones we were with had a certain reputation. And so one of those girls was amongst our friend group and was like, oh, I went to this thing called Beach Week this summer and it changed my life. I broke up with my boy. We're like, that's why you broke up with Brandon? And she's like, yeah, you need to come with me. And the funny thing about Chrissy is that I had known her from like the small Methodist church that my mom would like make me like serve VBS for. So it's like I knew, and she lived on the side of that was the other thing, is she and her brother Joey lived on our side of town too in Kissimmee. So she was like a fake Celebration person. Then I became a fake Celebration person. And then I came with her that night, and I'll never forget the first two times I was at Impact, and the first one was at the Civic Center, and just seeing a church that like people were having fun and there was vibes, and I'm like, what? And then like that was my first exposure to a church that like cared about things like how does the service feel, and like, oh my God, there's an electric guitar. And this is because the extremes that I've been to is like a couple like youth revivals that felt like a concert but very disconnected.
Yeah.
Or like with these weird old churches or like some hyper charismatic thing. This seemed to combine it all. Like there's even, I remember a girl, some people had come back from a missions trip. So one of the girls was really fired up and she like started randomly speaking in tongues. And that like for a second triggered me. But then like I saw a leader like come around her and was like handled it. Like I was like, oh. So these things, it was just...
Yeah, we kicked her out, never let her back.
It was just funny. And then the second time was when it was at the high school and our friend Abby Mers was on stage. I don't know, Abby and like another person were speaking, and this person behind me, who I still don't remember who this was, genuinely, but they told pretty sternly, me and my friends, to get off our phones. And so we just looked at them and said, oh, bet, see ya. And we just got up and left. And your sister... Megan, who was the other youth pastor at the time, I tell the story all the time because she followed us out in the lobby and was like, hey, like, I don't know what happened. Like, sorry. It's like, we have pizza afterwards if you stay. We're like, go, Megan. And then somewhere I started coming more frequently, and then I got the invite to that fall retreat. And then I like came because the girl I wanted to hook up with was there.
Yeah. Did you hook up with her?
Well, I don't know if it's the moment you're describing where all the leaders were inside, but I mean, it's pretty intense for the first few minutes of a podcast, but I guess it'll grab the attention. But I was a virgin. I had done things with girls, but I'd never had like the moment that in Superbad and all these like, all the movies, American Pie, you're like the moment. And it was the last night of camp. So I don't even remember what the first night was. Like I blew it off, all the spiritual stuff. Like I just have no memory of like caring about that. And right before the last night of camp, someone dismissed everyone to dinner or something. And that girl looks at me and says, like point blank, and she was attractive. Like this would have been like a big win for me in every category. And she goes, everyone's probably going to be in the cafeteria. Do you want to go back to my bunk right now and have sex? And and it was like, but something, I believe it was some manifestation of God helping me, or seeds planted by my mom, or prayers that leaders had been praying on that camp that night, that like I was faced with the very thing I had like seemingly worked my whole like young life for. And I just felt this like overwhelming sick. Like I just felt like sick to my stomach. And I was like, no, I'm good. And I should probably try to laugh it off. But then it was that night that I gave my life to Jesus. Like, and
dude, what a mixture of the Holy Spirit and camp food all in one.
And hormones, just raging erections. Dude, that's the name of that should be our youth ministry book title. Raging erections.
I feel like that could go real bad. I guess if you turn around, you always pointed to true north. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. All right. So fast forward past that. You got crazy involved after that, which was awesome.
Yeah.
You got heavily involved serving Sunday mornings, Wednesdays, like you just really plugged in. And I feel like it was longer than a year, about a year and a half. I don't know how long like you were there. That was like, you were like in celebration several days a week, fully committed.
Yeah, I mean, it was basically my entire junior and senior year.
Yeah,
like, I was there like, because I was 30 minutes away, and my mom, we couldn't afford for me to have a car. She couldn't get me over there. But I just knew I needed to be around these people and wanted to. Like, that was the other thing, is like, my experience with God was that this was also the most fun I'd ever had. Also, like, hanging out with you and like watching movies and eating food and like Zach and everyone. It was not like I was just like this super serious Christian. It was like, I'm having the time of my life and growing my faith. So I'd basically like every Friday after school find a ride to Celebration and stay there until like Sunday at 4 p.m. and get like a ride back over.
I love it. Which I love. So I think we'll have plenty of time to unpack a lot of that stuff that was built. But really, I remember specifically Megan coming to me. She is up and back in Illinois at this point.
Yeah.
And she was like, hey, I really want John back up in Rockford. I want him to come to Rockford where we are. And I was like, all right, let's figure out how to make that happen.
Yeah.
I didn't expect to be a few months behind you. But then I wound back up in Rockford a few months after you did. I think you got there in June. I got there in September or something like that.
And I got there late July. And you got there, September.
July, okay.
September, October.
Yeah, so it was just wild. But then I know you went and you were an intern, which was really fun for me to go up there and then take over the internship.
Yeah.
And we got into the mess that was a middle school ministry that hadn't been really attended to in seeming like a long time.
Yeah.
There wasn't a strong presence of, there was like you and one other male leader.
Yep. Shout out Spencer.
Yep. Fantastic. And it just was a huge need, which is a large part of the offer that got me up there, was trying to figure out what it meant to build that. So while we were operating that, how cool it was to go to the drawing board with you on the leadership side for the first time of our journey.
Yeah.
And create a middle school ministry that honestly really it popped off. It was awesome. That's not even what this is about, but it was such an amazing part of our life, my life, that just our journey.
Yeah.
And how cool I think that was.
Yeah.
But it's more, I think, what I'd love to just dialogue and even do a bunch of these episodes of just learning to lead alongside one another, because that was the largest learning curve, right? Being, even though you were an intern and I was the youth pastor, you still let me be your youth pastor for the next few years, which I think was awesome. Yeah. And you were on a team with your now wife, Amanda.
Yeah.
And there's just like so many parts of that leadership journey that I think are full of gold mines.
Yeah.
And worth unpacking and trying to figure out how that really tied us for life.
Yeah.
Navigating it all. Because it was, what most people don't realize is that you just were alongside of me for the entire journey of legwork. And let's see, you, after 3 years of your internship, you then moved up with your life group, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah.
And then also we're stepping into like an assistant youth pastor role.
Well, my 4th year was support staff.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Then the 5th year was
which really meant you were the assistant youth pastor, right, as support staff.
No, I mean, I tell people all the time, one of the best things for me, which I wish we could figure out how to replicate for more people, is like, I basically had the same person developing me and discipling me from the ages of like 16 to like 25. And we were still in my life. But like you said, like you really were like the youth pastor relationship that people, when they think of the best version of it, you know, the most intimate, intense, awesome version of it, like I had that from the same person. And even transitioning it from the student sense to then getting to have it carry over into the professional sense. I mean, I feel like I owe everything to that, the fact that got to happen.
And most people also, anyone who's on the outside really doesn't have any idea that at one point we actually went sideways.
Yeah, yeah.
But I always love talking about it because everybody that I reached out to that I considered like a good solid voice in my life told me it wasn't going to work and that we just needed to prepare to move on.
Including like randomly like people prophesying it. Like Dave Chris was like, I don't know what's happening, but whatever is here, it's not going to work.
I was like, make me another album, Dave.
Give me Bright Souls.
I'm like, I need more Stardust. Freaking love those guys. But what's wild is we were given, it was actually putting an authority over us that kind of messed us up a little bit because they didn't have any idea our dynamic. Yeah. And they just threw it into a blender.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot. I mean, I think that scenario has shaped forever the way that I approach organizational leadership.
Unpack that. Why?
Well, because especially in retrospect, well, it was so visceral and painful because part of it was one of the most important relationships in my life was essentially put at odds because of it. And a lot of that's just on me. Anyway, a more mature version of me could have weathered the storms of that weird situation. Like, we were put in a bad situation. Like, if John Maxwell was there, he would have been like, no. But like a more mature version of me could have weathered it better. But either way, even now, it would be hard because it was just an unwise, stupid way of leading people that is actually pretty common, which I'll get to in a second. But then also, like, because of that, I also was experiencing being promoted too early and broke aspects of a youth ministry that I cared deeply about, that I had up until that point spent the previous 5 years trying to build, that also felt like an extension of what we had built in Florida. So it's like, this is like almost a decade of my life. And I'm like, I'm failing. And so it was such a visceral learning experience that it stayed with me. But I think placing authority without proximity is dangerous.
Yeah.
Especially when that authority is not going to create some very real ramifications on what they do or don't sign off on. Like, I'm a huge fan of things like, hey, if it's going to change the day of a weekly event, if it's going to cost more than $5,000 or $1,000, whatever the threshold is for your church, like, there are things like that. But ultimately, all those are Band-Aids for asking the question, like, why is anyone in authority over something not within proximity of it? It's just none of us are actually that busy.
Yeah.
And if we are that busy, we shouldn't be in authority over it. And I think this is the cold cup of water in the face that churches and businesses, I think, are confronting. And I honestly think that the corporate world can actually be more proficient with it, because the bottom line, the dollars, the stock, the value tell you, dude, this is not working. But sometimes in church, what we do can be so abstract and spiritual that we will still be slaves to our personalities and our preference, because we just think, well, God called it this way, and I am the man or woman of God, and it's like, no, like, so I think it was that we had someone in authority over us that didn't have proximity to us or the thing, right? This person didn't come to our youth nights ever. This person didn't
literally
know
not
us,
once.
like not once. And then the other thing, which this is a great sin of leadership, is putting people in essentially the same role at 50-50. It's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
And what I wish would have happened.
You could say it's like it builds a wall between the two.
Yeah, no, I mean, you just spin in circles. And what I think should have happened is, what they should have done is made you the youth pastor over all of it, and made me your associate, or make you the, well, I don't know, whatever, but just make it clear somehow. You were the older person, you had the experience. And sometimes I think about, well, why did they choose me over Garret? Or why did they think that at 23 that I was somehow the equivalent to you at, how old were you, 32, 31?
I don't even remember. You have to give me the year. How old am I now?
2015,
40.
2016?
So, yeah, I was probably 29, 30.
Well, so I go, maybe they were thinking through that at this point in my adulthood, that some of our strengths and weaknesses were showing themselves, which is real, which at this point in our relationship, we can confidently say, I have strengths you don't have, and vice versa.
Yeah.
But what to me a leader does, especially in a Christian context, should have been like, hey, we recognize Garret isn't as good at boom and boom. And Garret, that is what we really like. As the department lead, Garret, we really want to see you lean on Jon for those areas. And you would have said, yes, I know all of those things because I've been developing him from me. But then, I mean, I'm nerding out on it, but I do think about it a lot, because I think it was a very important thing that I feel like people decided in like a 30-minute meeting, and it cost us.
Without us in the room.
So yeah, those are two things. I mean, authority without proximity is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, it's huge.
And 50-50 leadership it's not a thing. Someone's got to be 50. Someone's got to know who can make the call.
Yeah.
And because it was not the last time that I was put in a 50-50 experience in my life.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, that's wild. I referenced you're building a wall, not because it's an election year, but because we literally built a wall between our offices.
Yeah.
And put a door with a lock, and that's where it got so fast.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember. I feel like you got promoted maybe 2-3 months before summer camp, and which was the Dave Chris joke, because he was there because our tension was just like climbing and rising.
Well, yeah, and it's our biggest camp. I think that was our biggest camp ever.
Yeah, and it was just a wild time, but I always think through that journey, because the late summer and fall, most of it honestly is a blur to me.
Yeah,
because what I remember the most is sitting down at Dickie's barbecue, and I had asked you if you wanted to go out to lunch, because we hadn't gone out to lunch, because what we had is like 10 straight months.
Yeah.
We were like sometimes having to share a meeting space, all these things, and so the only time now we were touching base was because these interns were fighting, or this happened, or this didn't get worked out, or this didn't get picked up. And it's like, we went out to lunch and just addressed the fact that every touch point we had was this withdrawal.
Yeah.
And we had stopped investing anything.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, well, I don't know if you remember, but to me it was like the biggest deal ever, because you looked at me across the table and you just said, I think I need to go back to just letting you be my youth pastor again.
Wow.
And dude, I'm telling you, it forever changed like the humility in my life of being like, you would be willing to do that. That didn't change our roles. We were still 50-50. Like, what it changed was our dynamic and relationship.
Yeah.
And so you didn't let go of any responsibilities. You didn't have to. I didn't gain any responsibilities. I didn't have to.
But I gave you the 1%.
Yeah.
Or the 10% or whatever.
Yeah.
Which is sad that a 24-year-old had to make that decision instead of the people in charge. But
yeah, well, I believe they called it the Wild West.
Literally.
So we were out figuring it out for ourselves. And but what's crazy is we were able to. We were able to figure it out ourselves.
Yeah.
But I think what I love the absolute most, which is why I love watching your life, which is why I lay down your couch all morning watching you get up at 5:45 with your 1.5-year-old, because it's like the biggest joy of my life watching you get to dad and enter this next season of life, because that's the season of life I was in when we had this moment.
Right.
And it's like, just for me, it's surreal and cool to see. And I don't know. So it's fun how that played out. And I feel like we've been thicker than thieves ever since we were able to navigate that tension.
Yeah. Well, and it was, in retrospect, it was the young me having a lot of ideas about what success was. And in some areas, a healthy confidence in maybe my potential, but an overconfidence in my actual abilities. And that's a dangerous competition, or as a dangerous combination when you don't have someone keeping you in check, which is why authority without proximity is so bad, because especially with young, talented people, is if you're all the way over there, you can't see how that person leads their volunteer meeting. You can't see how, like, it's not supervision if there's not supervision. And unfortunately, a lot of times we are moving so fast and building org structures that, one, because of the speed we have chosen, move so fast that it has to be that distant. Like, oh, I'll catch up with you in a month and we'll do coffee. A once a month coffee, number one, isn't even development, really. And number two,
you have to check in.
There's no way you can tell how that person is leading their teams, leading their ministry, acting towards their spouse. Like, it's just not. And then the other thing that the speed does is it separates these supervision lines, but then it also, you move too fast to actually develop a bench. So when people transition, which is just sometimes a natural part of life, sometimes it's expedited by this ungodly speed that a lot of churches are currently still trying to go off of, even after COVID. Like, it's like they didn't learn and they're just still, when you don't have a bench, it causes your authority proximity ratio to be even larger, because you're like, well, we don't have anyone else to replace him, so just put him under Johnny. And with 17, so now it's another 8 people that this person still can't or won't get to, and the chasm just grows. And so I think that's what happened to me, is I thought I could do it better than you. And because, again, that was a point in my life where I started realizing what I don't think I was ready to process is that was when I really started to process your weaknesses. You were perfect to me for so much of my young life. And some of that's just like youth. But we had gotten to a place relationally where you were letting me into pretty much everything. And I was getting older and more aware. Yeah. And I saw some of the areas where I either saw you fail and make mistakes, or where I saw like just a weakness where you're just like, dude, John, I'm not the guy that's ever going to care about that. I took those things, and instead of drawing closer to you and embracing my own humility and limitations, I almost used your limitations as like credence for me having no limits. And I was like, well, clearly I am the chosen one. And we talk about Obi-Wan and Anakin all the time. When in reality, in our community, you're Yoda, I'm Obi-Wan, which maybe the arrogance of Obi-Wan was thinking that he could develop Anakin even despite the council saying that he shouldn't. Yeah. So maybe I created a lot of Darth Vaders. Check Facebook. I think I did.
I would check, but they all unfriended me. Thanks for that. No, man, I think I obviously relate to all that because it's my life too.
Yeah.
But it's taught me so much in that framework of what it means to be able to pass the torch. Like, dude, the number one lesson that I got to walk away with after we were able to repair us, and it was the ability to allow you to make your own decision and support you in it, whether I agreed with it or not.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't doing that prior.
Yeah.
I was trying to help you understand how dumb you were or how dumb that decision was.
Right.
And dumb that was my own definition in the moment from my perspective.
Yeah.
But thinking like, I don't know if he can see where this is going to lead, and he's going to want to change this in 2 months.
Yeah.
And so when that happens, right, we move fast and all the chess pieces tip over. That was like my fear and concern, because here I am sending these middle school kids up, and I want them to be taken care of. I want them to win. So there's these underlining like pastoral tensions of like, are we taking care of these kids?
Well, that's why I referenced that the summer camp when that happened being our biggest, because we had a system we had been working on for years that was at its apex.
Yeah.
That we were seeing, and it really is like, I don't know all the right words to put it, but it's like, it also is like, it feels like people tried to fix something that wasn't broken.
Sure.
It's like, and again, because people didn't have proximity to see like, guys, this is really good right now, how it is. We should not mess with this right now. And that was because we had essentially, I was the unofficial leader over high school because we had someone that was leading it, that was transitioning. But because you were my official leader, just de facto in life, you were basically leading middle school and high school. But you were leading high school through me, essentially, like, and we were leading it together.
Yeah.
And that synergy of resources and unity and strategizing, when are the 6th through 8th graders together with the 9th through 12th graders, and when are they not? And when is it important for us to have a joint unity and a distinct identity, and all that had led to some seriously awesome results that then we changed the formula. It's like, sometimes it's like, if it is an old Andy Stanley quote, which pour one out for that guy, but he says you have to know why something is working so that when it breaks, you know how to fix it. And I think that, again, the speed thing that a lot of churches want right now is just so damaging that, like, they don't even stop to think, like, wait, why is that working? Like, so yeah,
Dude.
all the things.
Okay, have you seen the show Silo? I think it's an Apple TV
No,
series.
I haven't. I've watched the trailers.
I'm angry because there's still only one season out there, but dude, it is so good. Silo push. But
Sponsor the show.
I don't know what would be a spoiler and what wouldn't, so I don't want to really talk about it, but it's crazy because it's just generations that have lived in this underground silo.
Yeah.
They've been there for as long as they can all know. They just were always there.
Yeah.
And you obviously can't go outside.
Yeah.
But the whole silo operates off of the generator in the basement.
Yeah.
And throughout the series, it occasionally shuts down or has an issue or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it's like the people at the very bottom of the totem pole are the only people keeping things going.
Yeah.
And everybody else lives cushy up top. And, so it just comes down to being able to fix the silo to know the issues and address it.
Right.
But also, when you sit back and think about it, like, no one has any idea as to why they do the things the way they do them.
Yeah.
So it's just reminds me a lot of...
Well, and it makes me think of some of this topic of deconstruction. It's just like woke. It's just like any of these terms. At one point, it's a very specific and helpful definition of something where you're like, yo, it probably is good to be a little woke. Like, woke, when I first experienced it, it meant like I was realizing that life as me is different than life as other people. And that some of those factors were due to where they were born or what they looked like. And that was good for me to learn, right? Now, woke has become this overloaded thing on either side of the political social spectrum. And I think that deconstruction is the same thing, because I think that there are elements that we should always be deconstructing, but I don't think it's the thing we need to be deconstructing is our faith. The thing we should be deconstructing is the parts of the world that have crept into our processes. And I think that there are some really good business practices that are just needed in the church. But then there are some things that got in that's like, yo, that's not a Christian thing. And so, like, to me, one of those things is like the photo op. This idea of like modeling servant leadership instead of being a servant leader. And it's almost this weird hypocrisy where it's like, by knowing that you need the photo op of the pastor scraping the tile or the church showing up for the community when there's a tornado, but not at all the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Like, you are inherently saying the value of it, but you're not going to embody it. You're just going to try to post it. And I think that's something that really gets a lot of people in trouble and a good question would be like, do we have servant leader photo ops or do we have servant leader realities? Because the reason why I just tying it together is that servant leader piece fixes your proximity issue. Is if you just go, I'm a board member, I'm an executive pastor, I'm the supervisor, I'm the senior pastor, whatever it is, and say, once a month, 12 times a year, I'm going to go to the youth ministry. Who doesn't have, and again, that would be like me looking at, to me, that would be like me looking at one of my kids and saying, oh, I should be at your gymnastics. But I don't have time. That's not the problem. Like, why don't I have time? That's the problem.
Yeah, it's never. Anyone who says they don't have time, it is a lie. It's never about time. It's about prioritize it.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you're talking about photo op, I know we're not talking about politics by any means, but it made me immediately think of how much hot water, like, the Donald Trump got in trouble when he walked across the street from the White House to the church, and he took just to take a photo with the Bible, and I think it was upside down.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, well, I think he's actually selling Bibles right now, believe it or not.
Well, he endorsed a Bible with his signature. But that's exactly it. Is it's like, that's not...
I need to appeal to XYZ.
The photo op is not a Christian value. It's just not, and I'm not saying photo ops are bad. I'm not saying it's bad to post or bad to whatever, because I don't believe in the other extreme where people are like, we shouldn't film that event because Jesus said pray in a secret place. And it's like, Jesus also said shout it on the rooftops, dog. So it's like, I just think specifically when it comes to putting yourself in situations that are above your pay grade or below your pay grade.
So then let me ask you this.
Yeah.
How would you encourage the young youth pastor whose direct leaders are never present? They don't come to the youth nights. And so they're playing the game right now of, well, I know my pastor watches what we post on social media, so I've got to be posting. I got to make it look like there's more kids in the room. Like, I mean, we all know, like, in the youth pastor world, right?
Yeah.
You see the angles where it's like, we had so many kids, and you're like, well, you didn't show the back 90% of the room that was empty. And good or bad, that's not even the point. The point is, why are we creating this perspective as the illusion for this person who's never there? Like, there's so much more of a deeper issue than...
Yeah, I mean, my biggest regret in our time in Rockford, neither of us are there now. We haven't been for a few years. My biggest regret was that I don't think I tried enough direct conversations. And while I still believe it never should have been something I had to ask for, I still believe that there were like more indirect cries for help. And it's like, but at the end of the day, I have to own the fact that I could have been way more direct and knocking on an office, even if I didn't have an appointment scheduled, or writing up an email, a report, putting a manila folder under the doorstop, or handing it to an assistant, and like just being more persistent and kind.
Yeah.
Because one of two things would have happened. One, my worst fears would have come true, which is that I would have just been yelled at and told that I was being disloyal by having an opinion. But at least I would have had complete clarity that I'm like, oh, I know where we stand. Okay.
You don't feel like that would have happened, though?
I don't know. I will always never know. And then, or the other hand, and let's just say for the sake of optimism and for the person listening, what maybe more likely would have happened is that by me acting more like a professional, being direct, speaking my needs, people can't meet needs that they're unaware of. And I think I got hung up on the fact of saying, you should know better. And I still believe that. Like, I know I've never been a senior pastor, but when I am a senior pastor, these are things I will, by the grace of God, not forget, because I'm going to keep people like you close to me to help me not forget and invite all your honest opinions, as I have since I was 16 years old.
I would like to note, every listener quick, that you said when and not if.
Yeah.
Yeah, just echoing it. So.
Yeah, I'm not going to lead a church until I'm in my 40s. I'm about to be 32.
Careful, man. It'll creep up on you.
I got some ways. But I guess what I'm saying, to that person, you'll never know unless you ask. And I want to encourage you to ask like a professional. Like, if you were wanting $1 million for a startup, how would you do it? You'd make a report. You'd probably put on a nice outfit. You'd be persistent. And I just think that a lot of times we settle for the lack of proximity or the lack of resource. You just got to ask. And again, there's clarity in the asking, because either you'll know it's a no or it's a yes. But I think where the real agony is living in the in-between, or maybe I'll bait them in with this like side comment in a meeting, or maybe I'll bait them in with this weird Instagram post, or maybe I should post like an Instagram story. I did this a lot when I was young. You called me out on it all the time. A Facebook status, an Instagram story. It's like, just need prayers right now, Dot. It's like, don't try to bait people in. Just, who is it that you need something from? Ask them for it. And even if they say no, there will be a clarity and a confidence that comes, oh, that's never going to happen. Got it.
Which, honestly, I think as you get older, you discover that's what actually accountability looks like. Accountability is not when your direct report finds you once a month to take you out to coffee, to open up the door to say anything you want to say.
Yeah.
Or let me ask you about X, Y, Z.
Right.
The accountability is going, I've identified my needs or my weaknesses or my issues, and now I'm going to go address them. I'm going to go tell this person that this is what's going on. It's you being on the forefront of your own situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a Christian leader holds themselves responsible for both. It's like, to the people that are above me, I hold myself responsible to go to them, but I do the same to the people that are below me. And I think that if we had that, if the both ways, we would have a lot more healthy chains of leadership and discipleship, where it's just like, I applied the concept you said, though. And it's funny, one of my favorite books, truly one of the most life-changing books of my life, is Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. And responsibility is always something that, you drilled into me. And this book just gave even further language to help that he was in the military. Like, for me, I was like, yeah. But the whole story starts by, there was a friendly fire incident, or the book starts, like, this is in real war.
Yeah.
And so American soldiers were killed by the special ops unit. And I think it was Jocko talking about Leaf, who was one of the other co-authors and leaders. And Leaf walks in. He wasn't even there, but it was his guys. And he goes, whose fault is this? And every man goes around the room, and they're saying, well, the comms guys, it's my fault because I didn't comment in. The recon guy said, I should have been able to see. And then the guy who pulled the trigger said, it was my fault because I pulled the trigger. And Leaf goes, it's my fault because I'm the leader. And yet, at the same time, he had clearly instilled in all of them to take responsibility, but he still took that's the goal, I think, is when you are instilling in your team that it's their responsibility, but as the leader, you're ultimately saying, but it's my responsibility. And I think that both ways, finger pointing happens far too much. Like, in some leadership scenarios, all you can do is take responsibility for your actions, even if you have leaders that are absent from you.
Yeah. Yeah, man. So I want to go back to a brief season where you were support staff.
Yeah.
And I know I was bringing you into scenarios and stuff that maybe were new to you behind the scenes of church operations, things like that. And in one end, it's like, oh my gosh, am I qualified to be in this conversation, or should I be?
Yeah.
But then at the same time, it's really, how else do you get prepared to navigate those on your own?
Yeah.
If you're not brought into them before, that way we could journey them together, so that as you handle them by yourself. Because we faced some random situations in our time. At one point, we had an executive pastor walk into our office, shut the door, and told us to change how we do things, or he could make our life a living hell. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Like, they're just weird things that I'm like, what would happen if I wasn't in this room? Yeah. Like, how intimidating and messed up that is for you being brand new into full-time ministry.
Right.
Like, that is not how full-time ministry should look.
Right.
And it's just a wild thing. And so, but it's part of it's like prepping, building, getting ready, what the journey is like into ministry, what the development process stays. And so I feel like that's still our journey now. It's like always developing for the next season of evolution of what that looks like. And if I get to be or can be a set of shoulders that you get to stand on, oh my gosh, how awesome. Because I know I've gotten to stand on some awesome shoulders in my life that I'm so thankful for. I'm thankful for the strong people that went before me, because their shoulders needed to be broad for my ignorance. And so now what, man? Where do we go from here? What do we do with all the things that we have learned over the years, how we have developed the ability to develop? And I think that is a very core niche that we can figure out how to have more of these conversations, but also find the collective young people out there that are trying to figure out how to do full-time ministry.
Yeah.
And how do we help them?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think maybe the thing that we haven't stated that maybe some have picked on by just watching this is that the proof is in the pudding. There's no reason you and I should be in each other's life right now. Right? Currently, like, you don't pay me, like, you're not my boss right now. Yeah. And yet, not only between us, but if we were to fill this coffee shop with some of the people that we've continued to journey with, whether it was even despite moves and transitions and deconstructions and whatever, there are those who have fought the fight and stood the test. And there are some people we are really proud of. And the proof is in the pudding. And I think it just goes back to, like, what do people want to produce? And I do not think I do not think that you have to choose between reaching new people and creating disciples. But I do think that you can't reach new people without creating disciples. I think there's an order here. Or I should say, you will only reach new people, but you'll lose them. And I think that there is a lot of ministries that, despite all their efforts, are a revolving door. And I don't think that's what anyone gets into ministry to do.
Yeah.
So what's missing? I think what's missing is moving at the speed of relationship. And my friend Nathan said that to me. Someone who has worked with every large church and blah, blah, blah. And he's just like, hey, the number one thing is like, churches just need to be willing to move at the speed of relationship. No faster. And relate. But what I have seen even in our life is that there is a multiplicative catch-up feature that however long it seems you're moving for 3 years, where you're like, we're not growing numerically, but I'm working on Johnny. Well, one day, Johnny, Sarah, Timmy, they're going to be freaking weapons. And then not only are they going to be solo weapons, but you're going to have a freaking team.
Yeah.
And I've said this on a couple of other people's podcasts, but in a meeting here in Charlotte, we were talking about volunteer recruitment, and someone was like, and we were struggling with it. And people were like, well, what are we, in the youth ministry at least, and well, what are we doing wrong? You know, we're talking about, someone goes, guys, we just need to do it like Jesus did it. And everyone's like, yeah, it's so good. And then and then they're like, yeah, so like, what did he do? And they go, well, he got his 12, he started with a small amount. And I go, guys, you're missing the thing. He spent 3 years with those guys. I go, when was the last time you've ever heard of a church setting a 3-year plan? It's how in 3 months, 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Shoot, with somehow these churches procrastinate events, 3 days, we need to fill with them. Blah. And I'm just like, but very quickly we see what seems slow. And we love to talk about the Pentecost moment where the 120 became 3,000. Yeah. But that 120 never would have existed if not for the 3 years with the 12.
Yeah.
And you don't get that without this. And I think that's what, as I've gotten older, I just look back and realize that on top of it being the most effective thing, nothing means more to me than our relationship or the relationship we have with Mark, with Tati, with Hector, with Cameron, with Bridget, with Ella, with these were at one time middle schoolers that we now do life with, or even if we're all across the country. And that's the joy. And I find it in the writings of Paul, how often, I think another underrated part of scripture right now, Garrett, is people always talk, Paul was confrontational, and Paul and blah, 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 and Paul said it how it was. Yeah, but read the headers. My dear son in the faith, how I long to be with you. Yeah. That's missing, I think, in a lot of ministry circles right now, because in our effort to reach the lost or build or get more people, which are all good things, I think we've lost that spiritual heritage, that family part.
Yeah, I think that's the hard part, is when you, as a senior leader, get to the spot where you just view people as staff or as employees instead of people and disciples and mentees.
Yeah.
And it's a game changer, and I feel like that leaves a huge gap, which honestly is a huge gap I see everywhere in every organization, not just the church world.
Yeah.
But I shouldn't have to see it in the church world.
100%.
Right? Is this leadership gap. And I think you look at the way the generations are lined up right now in the transfer of wealth, the transfer of power, and the boomer generation has the largest transfer of wealth that they are not transferring, that they're holding on to. And it makes people do this. You're like, are you going to let go of this or what? But we see that in the physical, in relationships. Yeah. And instead of it transferring knowledge and wisdom in what it means to find a mentor, we no longer even help people find mentors.
Yeah.
We no longer can even really define, so what should a mentor be? It just it's like a lost topic, and it's this huge gap. And what pays the price is the development of the individual. And I think that is tough. It's tough to watch.
And when the individual pays the price, the corporate will go next.
Yeah.
And that's where I go. When these next few years, if all I can do is get people's attention by appealing that they should care about the one because it affects the many, okay, then I'll do that.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I'm like, there's no cheating this. Like, there's just, and we've seen it. Church staff dries up, volunteer team dries up. And you're like, what do we do? And you're like, nothing. Like, you get stuck. And then you try to hire outside talent who oftentimes are just recycled people from another place. But then even if you hire outside talent and you don't integrate them into a system of development and family, the same thing will happen. And the Bible has language for that. It's called bad stewardship. And I think that there's leaders who are unknowingly burying the talent in the sand by keeping the status quo. Well, we've always been able to manage a 5% growth around Easter despite a 12% staff turnover. So your call in your city is to manage a 5%, or let's call it a 50 spike in attendance on Easter. Like, that's what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Well, if you see the trickle down effect, it leads to blah blah blah. Well, you don't really have systems to track what happens after people get baptized anyway. So what are we talking about? And in a business sense, if people can't follow the funnel all the way down, it's called a business that will go out of business.
Yeah.
And I think that we've got leaders who are getting by off the fact that the tithe is a biblical commandment. And because of the faithfulness of people in the church, there will always be money in the storehouse. And because we serve a gracious God who's going to move through our imperfections anyway. But I just want to see, I still think we can transform cities. It just doesn't come from blowing up attendance as the priority or our programs. It comes from prioritizing discipleship, development, and community that can feed into what, like, to me, I'm like, I don't care what you do after the fact. I'm like, if you want to have big conferences, if you want to have house church, I don't care. But you got to do this part first.
And all of those things, I think any church, right? It's like all of those things are byproducts of developing and growing people.
Yes.
Right? So you find another thing for them.
Yeah.
I don't know a better, faster, more efficient way to develop a person other than teaching them and showing them how to develop another person.
Right.
And you may have played a sport your whole life, but when you have to now coach that sport, your perspective booms and you see the game from a whole new way.
Yeah.
And your knowledge of that said thing grows immensely.
Well, because you might have a fastball, they might not, but they're still the pitcher. So you have to understand.
Well, it's
like
one
that
thing
baseball analogy.
Yeah, it's one thing to know how to do something, right?
Yeah.
I know how to field a ground ball. It's another thing to learn how to articulate it so that I can use words in such a way that will empower you to do the right thing the right way.
Totally.
And I feel like most leaders that maybe were gifted or talented and are great on a stage or can do X, Y, Z, but they don't have the means and haven't done the work to learn how to articulate that leadership to pass it on. And so they're just holding on to it, and their sphere of influence is the only impact they have.
Well, and I think that what we have a lot of, and I would say this is culturally, not just in the church, is we have a generation of people that are saying, well, back in my day, latchkey kids. What? It's like people are like, well, I was a latchkey kid. My mom never knew where I was. And look, I turned out okay. And or they're like, well, in my church, I never was discipled. And look, I turned out okay. So why can't they? And I'm like, okay, so we're okay with passing down our dysfunctions? Like, so what we're doing is we're celebrating the less than and the lack. Like, instead of trying to do better for the ones who come after us. And I've heard that so much from even people in senior leadership. I didn't have someone to develop me like that. And I turned out fine.
Yeah.
And then whenever someone says, when I turned out fine, I've learned as I've gotten older, you look at them and you go, wait, did you? Because it doesn't sound...
Those are the same people that have the mindset of like, it's okay, this kid will do it. You're like, I think this kid's going to break. We need to help this person. They're like, they just need to be pressed a little harder.
Yeah, you should crush them. And then they're like, hey, guys, they broke. And then they go to you like, well, why didn't you develop them better? It's like, so but again, if I had to pick one thing that I think is, what's one thing that everyone could apply, and this is a big thing. It is big, but it's simple. It's just going, what is the speed at which we're trying to do all of this? Because when I even look back at my own journey, I wanted to 10x and 2x and flip and flop. And some of it is because we get inspired by revivals without actually measuring, like, and I'll just be vulnerable, I guess. It's not even my own vulnerability. Maybe it's just controversial. I don't know. I was deeply inspired by Hillsong New York at the time we were doing this. And it was always so funny. It's funny now because you were always like, I don't get it. why do they dress like that? Even then, I remember I have your voice in my head being like, yeah, like it's Hillsong in New York, biggest city in the world, biggest church in the world, like, duh. And I'm like, no, dude, you don't understand. Look at the Phil buildings, and like you were always suspect of it. And not that God didn't do great things there, but like I have a lot of personal friends now who are a part of that, and they were all saying like, yeah, we were bringing people in, but we didn't know how to keep them. And so how many of us are modeling our speed of ministry growth based off of something that was unsustainable in the first place?
Yeah.
And I just think we just need to slow down and measure the quality of things more than the quantity. And if we just did those two things, I think we would be amazed, not only with the results, but the joy and satisfaction. Like, I want to look at a lot of senior leaders and leaders in general and be like, what if instead of dealing with constant transition meetings, you just figured out how to keep some of these people and you got to grow in the faith with them? Wouldn't you rather do that?
Yeah.
And so I think, to me, I don't know what your perspective would be. I think the speed and the models with which we use to derive that speed is one of the biggest threats to the church right now.
Yeah, well, I think that, and as much as it's preached every month at every church, death by comparison is the thief of joy, and we could go down the list. Yet,
and we're like, hey, print a banner like that church has.
Yet, it's the comparison and having to keep up or set the trend or be the trend or follow the
trend.
They
have an album. We need an album.
Yes, it is insane. And you're like, we don't need an album. We need 10 more serve team members or we can't put on service.
We don't need an album. You need a worker leader.
Dude, it's crazy. And so I think that, I don't know why there's certain things like that just repeat over and over again.
Yeah.
And it also tells me that it doesn't matter what somebody preaches. It matters what they actually do about the root issue, right? When it's obviously an issue and a nonstop thing. And I think the other part is every team I think I've ever been able to grow is because I put my everything into that team.
Yeah.
And yet when I look at senior leaders, they put their everything into their Sunday prep.
And further education?
No. I would agree with you, but I don't. I think they farm that out most of the time.
They don't even put their all into that.
No, I think they put it probably more into the board / their friends / the elders / the big tithers.
Yeah. And
I understand the political side of that, but then they can't figure out why their staff is bled dry because it has zero investment. And we think that slapping them on the butt on the way out of a Sunday morning is saying good game, like thanks for doing this, like that's reward enough. Also,
love you, buddy.
Yeah, and if that's reward enough, thanks for being here, thanks for doing this. If that's reward enough, how dry of a toxic environment have you created that the very bare min of a once a month or once a week validation is enough to keep someone going? Like, yeah, a drop of water means a lot to someone thirsty in the desert.
Right.
Yet we're expecting and hoping that everyone is going to thrive, that everyone is going to long for this overflow in their life. Yet we keep them hungry and thirsty nonstop.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I don't know if you want to wrap this episode or what.
Let's do it.
But, and stuff we can talk about more, but I think when you say pouring your everything into a team and like what are the bare minimum of just some of those pastoral touch points, it's like, man, I'd say like, it's not just about what you do, it's how present you are when you do it. Because I've been at plenty of family dinners where the person who was hosting wasn't even there, let alone actually engaging in conversation. And I think it's not measuring the touch point by the convenience it is to you. It should be measured by the impact it is for the people. So that might mean you can't meet with your high school and middle school leaders because there's too many of them for you to genuinely make them each feel seen. So guess what? You got to figure out a different way, or like, and you can do it, and it will be worth it.
Yeah, or you can settle, and your team won't grow, and that's the lid, right? That's the lid that people hit. That's why your group can't pass 200, or that's why your group because you're maxed out with what you're doing with your team. You're no longer creating and duplicating.
Yeah.
So you just have to figure out how to scale it.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to, you can't. You're tired. That's your max. That's okay. Just know that's your lid. That's your settling point. Your lead pastor probably has one as well.
Yeah, and I don't even know I think it's really healthy to know your limits, because then when you know your limits, it can put you in the right mindset to either grow beyond them or advocate for more resources right? So I think what should be happening at a lot more churches in certain departments is someone taking stock and going, we need another hire. I'm not going to feel guilty about that. I just have realized I have hit my limit with what I can do and healthily take care of my soul and my family. So I'm going to bring up data and I'm going to advocate for a part-time hire, a contract role, something to get more help in here. Or as a church, we just got to realize we can't expand here. Like, you can't expand beyond you can't play ball if you don't have a team. Like, you just can't. So I think I think we can talk more about those, but I think maybe the last thing I would think about that is, that's what you alluded to, is like, just remembering, like, are we called to the people or are we called to the place?
Yeah.
And I know that can sound in today's world of like the house. Jesus didn't die for the house. He died for the people in the house.
I'm pretty sure he left to go build a house.
Yeah.
At least a room.
And let's just remember, the brick and mortar and the logo and the reputation of the church is not what Jesus died for. It's the people that inhabit it. And so I think it's just that I think sometimes we just do a lot to advance the brand.
Yeah.
Even if we don't think about it that way, at the cost of the people. And it's just like, I just think it's important. The Bible talks a lot about shepherding, and a lot of Bible verses which is hilarious, never get touched, because I think it's far too. I was just reading in Jeremiah chapter 23 today about God is basically chastising the leaders of Israel that led the people astray, and he's like, you're going to be cursed because of that. And he goes, but I'm going to send some. Don't worry though. It's like God, like this is the John Rush paraphrase. He's like, I'm going to send some good shepherds. They're going to figure this out, and those people, not only will the people be blessed, but so will those shepherds. And so I just think, like, a lot of times we tell people, you need to die to what this place is, when I think we could do it a little bit more like going, this place is here to serve these people. So it's not just about our brand and the convenience we're trying to make. We're a church in Wisconsin called to reach these people. We're not Hillsong. We're not Highlands. We don't need to be. So I think place over people.
Well, maybe we should stop calling
people
shepherds.
Over place.
Maybe we should stop calling shepherds that don't actually tend the flock shepherds.
It's true.
Yeah. All right. Well, where do people go to find you more?
Well, they'd find me on Instagram at JONWRush. You can follow us on TikTok at The Youth Pastors. Probably YouTube is where you're watching this.
Yeah, buddy. I'm at Garrett Thor at everything, so that's my life.
Rock on. Until next time. Shout out to all of our Fuse venue people, Impact Elevate people, even some of our I always feel a little bit bad when I only say FV, because we had some people squeak in at the end that were just City First Youth people, that CFY acronyms. I don't know. Cut that out. At this point, only people that love us are listening to this anyway, I feel like. So leave a comment on this. We love you guys. And I was thinking halfway, first half of us recording this, I was so worried about, like, how's this going to play in the algorithm and how do we thumbnail and everything. And I just go, bro, if 20 of our old youth kids watch this and it blesses them, that's enough for me. Like, I'll do it over and over again.
This will be my closing thought, and then I'm hitting stop. But I don't know what you posted a few weeks ago, and I think I just reposted it, and it was about doing like a summer camp, or it was something along those lines. The amount of DMs I got about, like, is this happening? How do we need more information?
We're going to do it. So it will be in Wapaka, though. It has to be.
Oh, baby.
The first one. You can optimize the locale after that, but we have to go there first.
I'm not opposed. I am not opposed.
The Youth Pastor Summer Camp.
Till next time.